Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
My parents left everything to my brother, so I stopped paying their bills. A month later, my mother texted me, "Son, the mortgage is due." And I simply replied, "My name is Alejandro. I'm 35 years old. An ordinary guy, one of thousands in this city. I work as a department manager in a large company and rent a 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town. Nothing special, but enough to live on. I even managed to save a little. Although, for the past 7 years, most of my savings went to my parents. They retired when I was still in university. My father, Ramiro, spent his entire life working as an engineer at a factory, and my mother, Anna, was a math teacher at a school. Ordinary people, raised in the traditions of collectivism and mutual support. When I was a kid, they used to tell me often, "Family is everything, Sandro. You don't abandon your own." And I believed it. I believed it sincerely, with all my heart. 7 years ago, my parents decided to improve their living conditions. They sold their old 2-bedroom apartment in a brick building and took out a mortgage on a small house in the suburbs. A beautiful little house with a yard and a garden. Of course, their pensions weren't enough to cover the payments, so I offered to help. "Mom, let me help with the mortgage," I said one evening at a family dinner. "Son, you don't have to, we'll manage somehow," she replied, but the relief in her eyes was obvious. "Don't argue. You raised me. Now it's my turn to help." And so it went. Every month, I transferred money for the mortgage, utilities, helped with repairs. When Dad had a heart attack 3 years ago, I paid for his treatment at a good clinic. When the roof started leaking, I hired a crew. When the old fridge finally gave out, I bought a new one. I didn't mind. They were my parents. I also have a younger brother, Victor. He's 30, but still hasn't found his place in life. One day he's a musician, another a blogger, then a freelancer, but in the end, unemployed, living with our parents. As long as I can remember, Victor was always the favorite. Everything was forgiven, bad grades, truancy, and the endless bruised knees of other boys. "He's the youngest, Sandro, you have to understand," Mom would say whenever I complained about the unfairness. When I asked why Victor couldn't help with the mortgage, Mom just waved her hand. "What money, Sandro? His projects are creative, sometimes full, sometimes empty. He can't." "But I can, right?" I asked. "You're independent, reliable. We can count on you," Dad said proudly, patting me on the shoulder. And I silently agreed, because that's how I was raised. The elder brother must help, must set an example, must be responsible. All those years, I never asked for anything in return. I just helped because they were my family. Every month, $1,500 for the mortgage, plus utilities, groceries, gifts for holidays, unexpected expenses. Did I ever calculate how much I spent? No. It seemed irrelevant. After all, family means unconditional love, right? My parents always welcomed me with open arms. Mom would make my favorite meatballs with mashed potatoes. Dad would bring out a cold bottle of beer, and we'd sit on the porch discussing the news. In those moments, it felt right. Like real support. A normal continuation of our family story. I split my time between work and caring for them. I gave up weekends to help with the garden, dig up beds, fix fences. I worked overtime to pay for Mom's spa trips. I refused vacations abroad so they could travel to the seaside, like in their youth. Meanwhile, my brother Victor lived at home, enjoying everything without lifting a finger, occasionally offering token help, like putting the kettle on or taking out the trash. He spent days at the computer, insisting he was making it as a blogger or learning programming. Our parents looked at him fondly, admiring his efforts. Our Victor is so ambitious. I'll never forget last year, on Dad's birthday, Victor gave him a pack of cheap socks, bought with the pocket money Mom and Dad gave him. And I brought a big screen TV, something Dad had been dreaming of for years. And guess what? They were more thrilled about the socks. Victor remembers that Dad's feet get cold, Mom said emotionally. About the TV? They only said a dry thank you. But I didn't get offended. I swallowed my hurt and told myself, parents are parents. They love us differently, but equally strongly. That's what I believed until one Sunday that changed everything. It happened at the end of April. That spring had come early, and the apple trees in the garden were already covered in tender pink buds. Dad called Friday evening as I was finishing a quarterly report. Sandro, could you come on Sunday? I need help with some documents. The pension fund is asking for new paperwork, and I'm completely lost in all this. His voice sounded apologetic. Of course, Dad. I'll be there by lunch, I said, mentally rearranging my weekend plans. I had a date planned with Irene, a woman I'd been seeing for a month. We were supposed to meet at the Central Park for the opening of the summer season. I had to apologize and reschedule. Irene sighed over the phone. Going to your parents again? Sandro, this is the third time we've postponed. What can I do? Parents come first. They always have. On Sunday, I arrived at my parents' house around 1 o'clock. Mom, seeing me from the window, bustled around the kitchen, reheating lunch, slicing fresh cucumbers with dill from their small greenhouse. Dad met me in the hallway and hugged me tightly like a man. Come in, son. Thanks for coming. The house smelled familiarly of Mom's cabbage pies, Dad's cologne, and the faint earthy scent from the rubber boots in the corner. Victor didn't even come out of his room. From the muted sounds, he was either gaming or watching another series. After lunch, where Mom once again complained about the tiny pension and skyrocketing utility bills, Dad and I secluded ourselves in his office, really just a former storeroom with a battered desk from the 80s, a shelf with worn technical manuals, and a new computer I had gifted him last birthday. You see, Sandro, the pension office needs proof of my hazardous work conditions. I worked 3 years up north after university. But all the documents are old. We need to scan them and upload them online, he explained while rummaging through a battered cardboard folder labeled documents. I sat down at the computer and turned on the scanner, another gift from me, a useful tool for parents forever dealing with some bureaucracy. Dad laid out yellowed workbooks, certificates, and old orders on the desk. Here, sort these out, and I'll make us some coffee, he said, leaving me alone with the paperwork. I methodically sorted the documents, setting aside the ones that needed scanning. Among the pile was a new, neat folder titled Inheritance Case. I don't know what made me open it. Simple curiosity? Or intuition already screaming alarms? Inside were just a few sheets. I glanced at the first page and felt a chill in my chest. It was a will, drawn up just 3 months ago. An official document, notarized by Patricia M.R., complete with seals and signatures. I read the lines, each one hitting me like a punch in the gut. All of our property, including the house at address, the land plot, and other assets including bank deposits and securities, we bequeath to our son, Castiello Victor. I reread it twice, unable to believe my eyes. 7 years. 7 years I paid for that house, invested my money, time, energy. And they decided to leave everything to Victor, the one who never lifted a finger to help them. At that moment, I heard Dad's footsteps. He entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee and froze when he saw the open folder in my hands. His face changed, his eyes darted around, and the cups in his hands trembled slightly. Sandro, what are you doing going through my papers? His voice sounded forced, fake indignation poorly masking his embarrassment. Dad, I wasn't snooping. The folder was mixed with the documents you asked me to scan. I tried to speak calmly, although inside everything was boiling. Is it true? You really decided to leave everything to Victor? Dad set the cups down on the table, spilling a few drops on the documents. He didn't even notice. Son, you don't understand. It's just a formality. A formality, Dad? My voice shook. This is an official document. A will. Hearing the commotion, Mom peeked into the office. Seeing the open folder, she went pale and clutched her chest. "Darling, what's going on?" "He found the will," Dad answered quietly. Mom entered the room and firmly closed the door behind her. I noticed how she and Dad exchanged a glance, the kind people share when they've been caught doing something shameful. "Sandro, son, you have to understand," Mom began in that special voice she used whenever she wanted to ask for something. "We won't be around forever. We have to think about the future." "What future, Mom?" I still couldn't believe what was happening. "I've been paying the mortgage for this house for 7 years. Paying your bills, repairs, medical treatments. And you decided to leave everything to Victor?" "Victor? He's vulnerable." Mom sat on the edge of a chair, nervously twisting the hem of her house robe. "He needs support. But you're strong, independent. You're doing well, a job, an apartment." "An apartment?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Mom, I don't own an apartment. I rent one because all the money I could have been saving for my own place has been going toward your house." Dad cleared his throat and straightened up, as if gathering courage for a difficult conversation. "Son, listen. Victor, what kind of life does he have? No stable job, no prospects. If something happens to us, where will he live? And you? You're standing firmly on your own 2 feet. You have your whole life ahead of you." Standing firmly, I felt anger bubbling inside me. "Dad, I hand over $1,500 every month for your mortgage. Plus utilities, plus repairs, plus medicines. And what does Victor do? He doesn't even work. He's living off me, living off you." Mom threw up her hands. "Don't speak about your brother that way. It's hard for him. He's a creative soul. It's tough for him in this world of money and careers. And it's easy for me?" I no longer hid my indignation. "I'm breaking my back working 2 jobs to help you, and you treat it like it's just normal, like it's owed." At that moment, the office door swung open, and there stood Victor, sleepy, wearing a crumpled t-shirt and sweatpants. "What's all the yelling about?" He yawned. "Can't even get some sleep. Did you know?" I turned to my brother, holding up the will. "Did you know that Mom and Dad are leaving everything to you?" Victor shrugged like it was something completely insignificant. "Oh, that, yeah, they mentioned something." His indifference was the last straw. In one instant, all those years flashed before my eyes, the vacations I skipped, the postponed personal plans, the countless weekends spent at my parents' house with a shovel or a screwdriver, the endless $1,500 payments. And for what? To be left with nothing? I see. I slowly stood up from the chair. Now I know my place in this family. "Sandro, don't be so dramatic," Victor grimaced. "It's just a will. It's not like it'll matter anytime soon." "Shut up," I cut him off sharply. "Just shut up." I turned to my parents. They were sitting side by side, shoulder to shoulder, just like always when they felt guilty but had no intention of changing anything. "I get it now," I said quietly. "You think I should keep helping you just because I'm your son. But you owe me nothing. Very convenient." "Sandro, you know how much we love you," Mom began, her voice trembling with tears. "Love me?" I laughed bitterly. "Strange kind of love you have. You know what? Since Victor is your heir, let him pay for your house too. As of now, I'm washing my hands of it." I left the office, walked through the living room toward the front door. I could feel my parents exchanging worried glances behind me, unsure what to say. I heard Victor mutter something like, "Good riddance, psycho." Just as I reached the door, Mom caught up with me. "Sandro, are you really offended? Over money? This is family, son." I turned and looked her straight in the eyes. "In a real family, Mom, there's no deceit or betrayal. Goodbye." I got into my car and drove away without looking back. Inside, I felt empty and cold, as if along with my belief in parental love, something vital had been ripped out of me. Outside, the apple trees were blooming and the spring sun was shining, but I felt like an entire era of my life had ended. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. I buried myself in work, taking on extra projects, staying late at the office. Colleagues exchanged surprised looks when I volunteered to work weekends. Even my boss pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay. "Everything's fine," I replied with a strained smile. Work helped me not to think. And I didn't want to think. Whenever I was alone, the images would come flooding back. Dad's office, the will, their guilty faces, Victor's indifferent look. The resentment didn't fade, it only grew sharper, hardening into a deep, heavy anger. My parents didn't call. And I didn't call them either, though out of habit, I often found myself reaching for the phone on Sundays, the day I used to visit to help around the house. Was I hoping they would reach out first? Probably. I hoped for an apology, an honest conversation, a recognition that they had been wrong. But the phone stayed silent. Irene noticed the changes in my mood. We finally met up at the same park where we were supposed to go before all this happened. "Sandro, what's going on with you?" she asked when I didn't answer her question for the third time, lost in my thoughts. "Sorry," I rubbed the bridge of my nose. "It's just problems with my parents." "Serious ones?" "I think so." I told her everything. About the years of helping them, the will, the rupture. She listened quietly, without interrupting, only showing flashes of surprise and outrage in her eyes. "So, what now?" she asked when I finished. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I guess I'll just keep living without them. Maybe you should talk to them again? Maybe they don't realize how much they hurt you." I shook my head. "They know exactly what they did. They just prefer it that way. Having a son ATM to pay for everything, and a favorite son to inherit it all. Classic. You know, my dad used to say, blood ties are the strongest, but they're also the most painful when they break," Irene said thoughtfully. I didn't reply. What was there to say? Exactly 2 weeks after that Sunday, my phone rang. Dad flashed on the screen. I stared at the blinking display for a long time before finally answering. "Yes? Sandro?" Dad's voice sounded oddly dry, stripped of its usual warmth. "How are you?" "Fine," I replied just as dryly. There was a pause. I could hear Dad breathing heavily into the phone, searching for words. "Listen, son, here's the thing." He cleared his throat. "The mortgage payment's due. The bank says they didn't receive it." "Ah, so that's what this is about. Not how are you, son, not let's talk, not we miss you or even we're sorry. Just, the money didn't come." "And?" I asked, feeling resentment and disappointment tightening inside me. "Well, what do you mean and?" Dad said, a trace of irritation creeping into his voice. "You've always paid. We were counting on it." "Counting on what, Dad?" I tried to keep my voice steady, though my hands had begun to tremble. "Counting on me to keep paying for a house you've left to Victor?" "Sandro, come on, don't start again. We explained everything." "No, Dad. You didn't explain anything. You just decided I was supposed to support you and Victor until the end, and then be left with nothing. What does Victor have to do with it?" Dad sounded offended. "We just want him to have a roof over his head, just in case." "And what about me?" I chuckled bitterly. "Look, Dad. I'm not paying for your house anymore. I think that's Victor's responsibility now. He's the heir, after all." A heavy silence filled the line. Then I heard Mom's muffled voice in the background. "What did he say? Is he sending the money?" And my father's short reply. "No. Sandro, you can't do this." Dad's voice grew harsher. "We're your parents. You know we have a small pension. The bank is threatening to put the house up for auction if the payment is late." "Dad," I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. You're adults. You made the decision to leave the house to Victor. That's your right. I made the decision not to pay for something that doesn't belong to me and never will. That's my right. It's fair. You're such a bastard, Dad suddenly spat out, his voice unfamiliar, foreign to me. We raised you, fed you, clothed you, educated you. And this is how you repay us? It was like a slap in the face. In all my 35 years, I had never heard my father curse at me. So that's how it is, my voice turned icy. I was a good son as long as I paid. The moment I stopped, I became a bastard. Nice to know your love comes with a price tag. Sandro, wait, I heard Mom's voice as she clearly snatched the phone from Dad. Son, don't be mad at your father, he's just upset. Let's meet, talk calmly. About what, Mom? About how you used me all these years? Don't be ridiculous, Mom's voice was already thick with tears. We love you. Everything we have is for you, for the children. For Victor, Mom. Not for the children. Everything is for Victor. Sandro, please stop, Mom openly sobbed now. You know we always cared about you. Goodbye, Mom, I hung up and placed the phone face down on the table. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest. I walked to the window and stared outside for a long time, watching the passers-by, the cars, people hurrying about their lives. Ordinary life for ordinary people. I wondered how many of them had similarly complicated relationships with their parents. The phone rang again. This time it showed Mom. I didn't answer. A minute later, a message came through. Son, please call us back. We are your parents. You can't do this to us. I replied briefly. I can. Don't call me anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying the conversation with my father, remembering his bastard and Mom's tears. Was I really doing the wrong thing? Was I supposed to help them simply because they were my parents, regardless of how they treated me? By morning, I had come to a conclusion: no. Relationships should be mutual. Even, especially, with parents. The next day, the messages poured in nonstop. Mom wrote almost every hour, alternating between begging and accusing. Sandro, think of us. We're old now. How can you do this to your parents? We raised you. Son, this is disrespectful to your elders. We are very disappointed. We never thought we'd raise a son like this. From Dad, I received only one message. Come to your senses. You're crossing a line. I didn't reply. What was there to say? They weren't even trying to understand my feelings, my pain. For them, there was only one truth: a son must help, period. On the evening of the third day, Victor called me. I was surprised. Usually, my brother never bothered to call. Hello, his voice was irritated, as if I had interrupted something important. I'm listening. What the hell are you doing? He started without greeting. Mom and Dad are beside themselves because of your tantrum. Tantrum? I couldn't believe my ears. Victor, they left the house to you. The house I paid for over 7 years. Oh, here we go again, he sighed heavily. Why are you being so petty? It's just money. If it's just money, why don't you start paying the mortgage? I asked. I don't have that kind of money, you know that, he whined. I'm still trying to find myself. Find yourself? Victor, you're 30 years old. Time to find something already. Screw you. He snapped. Not everyone is born a workaholic careerist. I'm a creative soul. Sure. So creative you haven't earned a dime in 30 years. There was a pause on the line. Then Victor's tone softened a little. Listen, can you cut the sarcasm? Our parents are really worried about the mortgage. You know their pension's tiny. The bank's threatening to take the house. I understand, I replied. But that's your problem now, Victor. Time to finally get a job. Screw you, he snorted. Making a drama out of nothing. Can't you just help? It's not about the money, Victor. It's about fairness. I invested in that house, believing it was our family's. Turns out it was yours all along. Oh, take the damn house if you want it so bad, he burst out. I'll ask them to rewrite the will. That's not the point, I shook my head even though he couldn't see it. It's about how they treated me, always the cash machine son, while you were the golden child. I'm tired of it. You're so petty, Victor drawled. All this over a piece of paper. That piece of paper was the last straw, Victor. It's been like this my whole life. Nothing expected from you. Everything expected from me. Well, don't help then, he barked. But don't come crying later about being misunderstood and mistreated. I chuckled. I won't. And you better start looking for a job. The mortgage has another year left. Screw you. Victor hung up. I sat there, holding the phone, wondering. Does my own brother really not understand the situation? Or does he just not want to, because it's easier that way? For the next week, the calls and messages kept coming. Mom messaged morning, noon, and night. Dad called several times, but I didn't answer. Even Aunt Nina, Mom's sister, called, trying to talk sense into me, urging me to help my parents in their time of need. I got tired of explaining the same thing. It's not about money. It's about respect. Eventually, I stopped answering unknown numbers and put my parents' contacts on silent mode. And then the thing I had subconsciously feared happened. They came to my home. It was Sunday, around 6 in the evening. I had just returned from the store with bags of groceries and was about to make dinner when the doorbell rang. Just in case, I checked through the peephole and froze. Mom, Dad, and Victor were standing outside. I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was not to open, to pretend I wasn't home. But then I thought, how long am I going to keep running from this conversation? Sooner or later, it has to be dealt with. Who is it? I asked, even though I already knew. Sandro, open up, it's us. Mom's voice sounded brittle, like she had been crying. I opened the door but stayed standing in the doorway, not inviting them in. Mom looked worn out, dark circles under her eyes. Dad stood stiffly, his face like stone. Victor shifted awkwardly behind them, clearly feeling out of place. Hello, son, Mom tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. Can we come in? Why? I crossed my arms over my chest. We already discussed everything over the phone. Sandro, don't make a scene, Dad stepped forward. We need to talk. In the hallway? I sighed and stepped aside. Fine, come in. They entered the hallway and started taking off their shoes. It felt strange seeing my parents in my apartment. They rarely came over, it was usually me visiting them. Dad glanced around, as if evaluating the place. Mom sighed heavily, as if bracing herself for an unpleasant conversation. Victor simply flopped onto a stool in the hallway and buried his face in his phone. Let's move to the kitchen, I said, gesturing the way. My rented apartment was small. 2 rooms, a tiny kitchen, and an old renovation. We barely managed to squeeze around the kitchen table, which was meant for no more than 3 people. Would you like some coffee? I asked more out of politeness than hospitality. Sandro, we didn't come for coffee, Dad said, placing his hands on the table. We need to settle the mortgage issue. I sat down across from him and looked him straight in the eyes. I've already made my decision. I won't pay any more for a house you've willed to Victor. Then take the house. Mom suddenly cried out, throwing up her hands. We'll rewrite the will. Just help us, son. I turned my gaze to her. Don't you understand, Mom? It's not about the house. It's about how you treat me. Like an ATM. Nonsense, Dad grumbled. We've always loved you. Loved me? I gave a bitter laugh. By choosing Victor over me? By taking my money for granted? By secretly deciding to leave everything to someone who didn't lift a finger to help you? Here we go again, Victor grimaced and kept scrolling through his phone. Always playing the victim. I felt my anger rising. Victor, you should really stay quiet. 30 years living off our parents, not bringing a dime into the house, just consuming. And now you'll get the house too. Sandro, don't start, Mom said wearily. This isn't about Victor. Then who is it about, Mom? Money? I leaned back in my chair. You know, I'm not even surprised anymore. You never asked how I lived, what was going on in my life. You only called when you needed money. You confirmed everything I've thought about you. How dare you? Dad slammed his fist on the table. We raised you, educated you, did everything for you, and now you turn your back on us? Dad, let's not. I shook my head. You raised me, you educated me, that was your responsibility as parents, not a favor. Am I supposed to owe you for life? Then logically, what do you owe me as parents? Respect? Fairness? Honesty? Silence fell over the kitchen. Mom covered her face with her hands, her shoulders trembling. Dad stared out the window, lips tightly pressed together. Victor finally looked up from his phone and said tiredly, "Oh, come on. Why the tragedy? It's just a will. You'll live 100 more years." It's not about the will, Victor, I said, trying to stay calm. It's about what the will revealed, the real attitude of our parents toward me. What real attitude? Mom raised her tearful eyes to me. We've always loved you. Loved me? I couldn't help raising my voice. Where are the actions to back it up, Mom? Where's the fairness? Where's the gratitude for years of help? Where's the respect for my work, for my money? Money, money, Dad waved his hand irritably. All you think about is money. What about your duty as a son? What about parental fairness? I shot back. Why should I invest in a house you've willed to Victor? Because we're your parents, Dad raised his voice too. And you owe it to us, whether you like it or not. Oh? Oh who, Dad? I leaned forward. I should take care of people who didn't even bother to thank me for 7 years of financial support? Who secretly left everything to my freeloading brother? Don't you dare talk about your brother that way, Mom lifted her head, anger flashing in her tearful eyes. And there it was. She was defending Victor again, even now. It hit like a punch to the gut, another confirmation that no matter what I did, I was always second best. You know what? I stood up from the table. This conversation is pointless. You're not trying to understand me. You came here for money. You don't need me, you need my wallet. Son, why are you saying such things? Mom reached out to me. We came here to work things out peacefully. Peacefully? I smirked. And if not peacefully, then what? Dad already called me a bastard on the phone. What's next? You'll curse me? Disown me? Dad's face flushed with anger. How dare you talk to us like that? We gave you life. And now you think my life belongs to you. I shook my head. You know what the problem is? You think love is a one-way street. Children owe their parents, period. But what about what parents owe their children? To love them equally. To be fair. To respect them. Silence fell again in the kitchen. Mom cried soundlessly. Dad stared at the table, lips pressed together. Victor shifted awkwardly, still glued to his phone. I won't pay the mortgage anymore, I said firmly. Nor the utility bills. That's Victor's responsibility now. He's the heir. Let him take care of the house. Victor doesn't have that kind of money, Mom objected. Then it's time he earned it, I shrugged. He's 30 years old. Long overdue. Screw you, Victor finally said, looking up from his phone, his face red. Acting like you're so much better. Like you're some big shot and I'm a loser. I have projects, you know. I run a blog. Wonderful, I nodded. Then start monetizing your blog and pay the mortgage. Problem solved. You're just jealous. Victor jumped up, his face flushed. Jealous that I'm a free spirit and you're a corporate slave. A free spirit living off pensioners, I shook my head. Victor, at your age, I was already supporting not just myself but you and them. And now you're all high and mighty? Victor stepped toward me, fists clenched. Think you're smarter than everyone else? Dad placed a hand on Victor's shoulder. Enough, son. Don't stoop to his level. Of course. Again, I'm the villain, and Victor's the good guy. Even now, even after everything. I think we're done here, I pointed to the door. You can leave. Sandro, Mom grabbed my hand. Please think about it. If the bank takes the house, we'll have nowhere to go. There's Victor's dorm from his freelancer courses, I pulled my hand away. Or Aunt Nina's apartment. Or you can sell the car and rent a place. Sandro, Mom gasped in horror. How can you talk to your parents like this? And how could you do this to me? I looked her straight in the eyes. Taking my money, my help for years, and then leaving everything behind my back to Victor? Mom lowered her eyes, unable to answer. Let's go, Dad said, standing up and putting a hand on Mom's shoulder. We're not welcome here. They walked to the hallway. I heard them putting on their shoes, Mom quietly sobbing, Victor muttering under his breath. I didn't leave the kitchen. I knew if I saw Mom's tears, I might break. And I didn't want to break. Not this time. Remember this, son, Dad said from the door. The day will come when you'll be ashamed of yourself. Blood is thicker than water. The door slammed shut. I was alone. I sat down on a chair and buried my face in my hands. Inside was emptiness and exhaustion. Did I know I was doing the right thing? Honestly? Not completely. I was raised to believe you must respect and care for your parents, obey them. But aren't parents supposed to respect their children too? Be fair? Appreciate their efforts? That night, I didn't sleep again. I lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about Mom's tears, Dad's words, blood is thicker than water, and Victor's bewildered face. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I should help them one last time, at least with this payment. But in the morning at work, when I turned on my computer and saw my bank balance, I knew no. If I gave in now, nothing would change. They wouldn't see their mistake. They would just think I had come to my senses and resumed my role as the obedient ATM. And everything would go back to the way it was. I had to resist the emotions. Not give in. If someone has been walking all over you their whole life, they won't change after one conversation. It takes actions. It takes consequences. That day, I blocked my parents' and Victor's numbers. I physically couldn't endure the psychological pressure any longer. I needed a break to sort out my feelings. But instead of peace, a real war started. A war on social media. 2 days after their visit, I noticed strange activity among my acquaintances. First, Aunt Nina, Mom's sister, whom I hadn't spoken to in months, called. Sandro, what's going on over there? She began without greeting. Your mom's been going on and on about how you abandoned them. I didn't abandon anyone, Aunt Nina, I answered calmly. I just stopped paying for their house. What do you mean stopped? She sounded genuinely confused. Who's going to pay now? They barely have any pension. Maybe Victor? I suggested. After all, he's the heir to the house. There was a pause. Heir? What are you talking about? Aunt Nina asked, clearly confused. Didn't they tell you? I said with a humorless smile. Mom and Dad wrote a will leaving everything, including the house I paid for, to Victor. No way. Aunt Nina sounded truly shocked. Anna never mentioned anything like that. I thought so, I nodded to myself. They're only telling the part of the story that paints me as the ungrateful son. That same day, I visited my mom's social media page. She rarely used social media, but she liked that particular site because all her former teacher colleagues and classmates were there. And I froze in disbelief. Mom's page had turned into a full-blown wall of lamentations. How hard it is when children forget about their parents. You dedicate your whole life to your children, only to be repaid with black ingratitude. Where did we go wrong raising our son? Why did he turn his back on us in our time of need? Under each post were dozens of sympathetic comments from her friends. Stay strong, Anna. Sandro will come to his senses, he has nowhere else to go. Or, in our days, things were different. We honored our parents. I scrolled further and saw a picture of my parents standing outside their building. Dad was in his old coat, Mom in a knitted hat, both with sad faces. The caption read, "We may be living our last days in this house. The bank is threatening foreclosure because of mortgage arrears. And the son to whom we gave education and a start in life refuses to help." The number of likes and sympathetic comments under that post was overwhelming. Some commenters even suggested organizing a fundraiser to help the poor pensioners abandoned by an ungrateful son. I felt a painful tightness inside from the injustice and bitterness. They were portraying themselves as victims and me as a monster, carefully leaving out the crucial detail that I had been paying for their life for years while they secretly willed everything to Victor. Later that evening, I saw a post from Dad on the same site. It was less emotional but even more accusatory. It's hard to realize that your own son, whom we raised into a real man, has forgotten his duty. In our time, that would have been unthinkable. We always cared for our parents and helped however we could. Now, apparently, everyone only cares about themselves. It's sad to face old age in such conditions. This post, too, was flooded with comments of support and criticism directed at me. Dad's former factory colleagues were particularly zealous, men of the old school for whom caring for one's parents was sacred, and any deviation from that was almost a crime. Victor didn't stay silent either. On his page, he posted a long message about how hard it was for our parents, how he was trying to support them, but his modest freelance earnings weren't enough to cover the mortgage. My brother, who earns 5 times more than I do, decided to show his character and abandoned our elderly parents, Victor wrote. And all because of some piece of paper that won't even matter for another 20 years. How can someone be so petty? Family is the most important thing in life, isn't it? I was stunned. They had launched a full-blown information war against me, painting themselves as victims and me as the villain, while carefully hiding the existence of the will and the fact that I had been funding their lives for years. Soon, distant relatives, former classmates, even my parents' neighbors began calling and messaging me. All asking the same thing. How could you do this to your parents? I was tired of explaining to each one that it wasn't just about money, it was about how my parents treated me. That it wasn't just occasional help, but years of financial support taken for granted, while behind my back they had willed everything to my freeloading brother. After yet another call from an outraged cousin who said sons like me should be disowned, I snapped. It was time to tell my side of the story, the whole story, without cuts. I sat down at my computer and wrote a long post. I started from the very beginning. How 7 years ago my parents had taken out a mortgage on the house. How I had offered to help. How I had been transferring money every month, paying for repairs, buying household appliances, even taking them on vacations. I described how I had accidentally discovered the will, leaving everything to Victor. How my parents had justified it by saying Victor needed it more and that I was strong enough to manage. How, when I refused to keep paying, they didn't try to understand my feelings but immediately started guilt-tripping me. I'm not against helping my parents, I wrote. I'm against my help being taken for granted while schemes are plotted behind my back. I'm against one son being the golden child, forgiven for everything, and the other being treated like a cash cow. Family should be about mutual respect, not exploitation. At the end, I added, and if you, dear relatives and acquaintances, want to interfere in this situation, take the time to understand both sides. Ask my parents why they aren't mentioning the will. Ask them why they're not telling you that I paid for their life for 7 years. Ask why they think it's normal for a 30-year-old Victor to still be living off them. I posted it across my social media accounts and immediately turned off notifications. I knew the reaction would be explosive and didn't want to drown in it. That evening, Irene called. We were supposed to meet over the weekend, but because of everything going on, I hadn't been in the mood for dates. I saw your post, she said instead of greeting me. How are you holding up? I've been better, I answered honestly. I didn't expect my parents to launch an entire campaign against me. They're afraid of losing their house, she said with sympathy, but without judgment, and I was grateful for that. But you know, if you want my opinion, you did the right thing. Really? I was surprised. Most people think I should help my parents no matter what. Most people have only heard one side of the story, Irene countered. And besides, helping doesn't mean allowing yourself to be manipulated. Your parents acted unfairly, and now they are facing the consequences. Her words were like balm to my soul. Someone finally understood me. Thank you, I said sincerely. You have no idea how much it means to hear that. Hang in there, she said gently. And remember, family isn't just about blood ties. It's also about respect, honesty, and mutual support. After speaking with Irene, I decided to check social media and see the reaction to my post. What I saw surprised me. The reaction was almost evenly split. Some supported me, saying I had every right to refuse financial support after such treatment. Many shared their own experiences of toxic relationships with parents, manipulation, and guilt tripping. Some shared stories of how they had helped family for years only to be left with nothing. But there was another half, those who believed that parents are parents, and I must help them no matter what. They raised you, educated you, put you on your feet. Children used to support their parents to the end of their days. They won't live forever, have some pity. My parents, unsurprisingly, reacted strongly. Mom wrote a long comment saying that airing family disputes publicly was shameful, that I was tarnishing them in front of relatives and friends, and that the will was just a piece of paper, not a measure of true love. Dad was more concise. A real man doesn't air family problems publicly. And he doesn't blackmail elderly parents. Victor unleashed a full-blown tirade. He accused me of lying, twisting facts, and being jealous of his free lifestyle and creative fulfillment. He insisted that he was helping the parents in his own way. Not everything is about money, brother, he wrote. You help with money, then fine. But I help with moral support, my presence, my care. You visit once a week for a couple of hours, while I live with them, listen to their problems, help around the house. Who's really closer to them? That was too much. I knew exactly what Victor's help looked like, dirty dishes piled up, clothes strewn around that Mom cleaned up after him, and moral support consisting of endless talk about grand projects that never materialized. I started to write a reply, then stopped myself. It was time to end this pointless exchange of accusations. Continuing would only make things worse. Besides, I felt that my position was already clear. Those who wanted to understand, understood. The rest would never be convinced. I decided to focus on my own life. For the first time in 7 years, I had the chance to spend money on myself instead of funding my parents' household. Maybe it was time to think about buying my own place. Or finally taking that trip I had dreamed of. Or maybe marrying Irene, who had supported me in my darkest hour. But my parents weren't about to give up so easily. Their next move hit me below the belt. A week after the social media war, my boss called me in. Alejandro, come to my office, Senor Moreira's voice sounded unusually formal. I went up to the third floor, to the spacious office of the department head. Senor Moreira, a man in his 50s, with neatly graying hair and perpetually tired eyes, sat behind his desk flipping through papers. He looked nervous. "Have a seat," he gestured to the chair across from him. "We need to talk." I sat down, feeling a strange tension. We had always been on good terms. He appreciated my work and often praised me in meetings. What could it be? "Listen, Sandro," Senor Moreira rubbed his forehead. "I got a call today." "A call?" I didn't understand where he was going. "From your father," he said it like he was confessing something shameful. "He said you abandoned your parents and refused to help with the mortgage." "Is that true?" I felt a wave of outrage rising inside me. "Excuse me, Senor Moreira, but what does that have to do with work?" My voice came out colder than I intended. "Nothing," he sighed. And I told him that. But he was very persistent. He said you earn enough to help your parents. I couldn't believe my ears. It wasn't enough that my parents had launched a smear campaign on social media, now they were calling my workplace. This was crossing every line. "Senor Moreira, I've given my parents a fortune over the past 7 years. I tried to keep my voice steady. I paid their mortgage, utilities, and home repairs. And without even telling me, they drafted a will leaving everything to my brother, who has never worked a day in his life or helped them financially." My boss raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Really? Your father failed to mention that." "I'm not surprised," I said with a bitter smile. "He also forgot to mention that my 30-year-old brother still lives with them, fully dependent, and that they've never once said thank you for my help, always taking it for granted." Senor Moreira looked at me with undisguised sympathy. "I understand," he nodded. "Family matters are complicated, especially when money is involved." "It's not about the money," I shook my head. "It's about respect. About fairness." "Maybe so," he shrugged. "In any case, it's not my place to judge. I told your father that this is a private family issue, and I will not interfere." "Thank you," I said sincerely. "No problem," he gave a weak smile. Although, I must admit, he's a very persistent man. He said he would escalate it to upper management if I didn't do something. That was already blackmail, plain and shameless. "He can call the president if he wants," I straightened in my chair. "My personal life is nobody's business as long as I do my job well." "Agreed," Senor Moreira nodded. "I just wanted you to be aware." And also, he hesitated. "He said he and your mother might come here to confront you in person." I froze. That was the last thing I needed. A public scene at my workplace, my mother crying in front of my colleagues, my father accusing me. It could seriously damage my reputation. "When?" was all I managed to ask. "Today," Senor Moreira said apologetically. "After lunch." I tried to dissuade them, but... "I understand," I got up. "Thank you for warning me." "Sandro," he called out as I reached the door. "I don't know all the details, but if you need some time off or anything, just let me know." "Thank you, but I'll manage," I gave a faint smile. It's not my first time. Returning to my desk, I couldn't concentrate. One thought hammered in my head. They're really going to come here. They're going to make a scene. I imagined Mom crying in the lobby, Dad sternly telling my colleagues about their ungrateful son, whispers behind my back. Can you believe it? He abandoned his parents with no money. The prospect was horrifying. During my lunch break, I stepped outside and called my father. Is it true that you're planning to come to my office? And what if we are? He replied without a hint of embarrassment. Since you're ignoring our calls and messages, we'll meet you where you can't avoid us. Dad, I tried to speak calmly, this is my workplace. Do you realize that a visit like that could cause serious problems for me? And you don't care that your parents might lose their home? He shot back, poorly hiding his anger. We've already missed 2 mortgage payments. The bank has sent a final warning. I understand, but... No, you don't understand, he interrupted. Who else can we call if not you? Your brother's unemployed, he has no money. But you do. Then he needs to find a job, I said, my patience fraying. He's 30 years old, Dad. It's long overdue. He's trying, Dad objected, though we both knew it wasn't true. But that's not the point right now. We need money now, not when Victor gets a job. Dad, I sighed deeply, I won't meet you, and I'm asking you not to come to my office. It won't solve anything. It will only cause more problems. Then call your mother and tell her you'll pay the mortgage. His tone turned threatening. Or we'll come anyway. That was outright blackmail. I felt anger and resentment boiling inside. Fine, I said. Come. But just know, I've alerted security. You won't get past the lobby. And if you create a scene, I'll call the police. You would call the police on your own parents? Dad's voice was full of genuine disbelief. And you're blackmailing your own son, I retorted. Who crossed the line first? Dad was silent for a moment, then said coldly, Fine, Alejandro. We won't come. But don't think this is over. He hung up, leaving me standing there gripping my phone. What did he mean? What else could they possibly do? The answer came the next morning when I checked my email. Among the work messages was one from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, From your parents, Castillo. I opened it and could hardly believe my eyes. It was a letter addressed to the company's management, where my parents detailed how their promising son, Alejandro Castillo, had abandoned them without means, refused to help in a time of need, and showed black ingratitude. They appealed to the leadership to remind Alejandro of family values and filial duty, arguing that someone who betrayed his parents could not be a reliable employee. The email had been sent to all department heads, including the CEO. This was no longer just blackmail. It was an attempt to destroy my career and tarnish my reputation. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling the cold realization wash over me. My own family was willing to destroy me just to get what they wanted. Half an hour later, I was summoned to the HR director's office. Walking there, I was already mentally preparing for dismissal. Who would want an employee with such baggage? Senora Domingo, a sharp-eyed woman in her mid-40s, greeted me calmly. Sit down, Alejandro. I think you know why you're here. It's about the letter from my parents, I nodded, trying to appear calm even though I was trembling inside. Exactly, she said, folding her hands on the desk. It's a rather unusual situation. I understand, I straightened up. And I want to say up front, I'm ready to submit my resignation if this causes any problems for the company. Senora Domingo raised her eyebrows in surprise. Resignation? Why would you think we're talking about that? Now it was my turn to be surprised. Well, the letter. It was sent to all the management. My private family matters are now public. Alejandro, she leaned slightly forward, your family matters are just that, your family matters. They have no bearing on your work, and by all accounts, you do your job excellently, according to Senor Moreira. Thank you, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Still, I would like to explain the situation. No need, she shook her head. I only called you here to tell you not to worry. The email has been deleted from the circulation list. Management understands this is a personal matter that does not concern your work. No one will interfere or judge you based on it. I didn't know what to say. After everything that had happened in the past few weeks, this support was almost a shock. Thank you, I finally managed to say. You're welcome, she smiled faintly. You know, I also have a complicated relationship with my mother. I understand what toxic family ties are like. I nodded, not knowing what else to say. The only thing I would ask, she continued, is that your parents don't send any more letters or call the office. It's disruptive, not just for you, but for the whole workflow. I'll do my best, I promised, though I had no idea how to keep that promise. Thank you for your understanding. Leaving her office, I felt both relief and anxiety. I wasn't getting fired, and everything at work was fine. But what would my parents do next? What other tricks did they have up their sleeves? The answer came quickly. That evening, as I returned home, I found my elderly neighbor, Senora Blasco, standing by the building entrance. She lived one floor above and was usually very friendly, always greeting me, sometimes bringing pies, asking about my life. But now, her face showed disapproval and even a certain disdain. "Good evening, Senora Blasco," I greeted her, pulling out my keys. "Aren't you ashamed?" she asked instead of replying, blocking the entrance. "You made your own mother cry." "Excuse me?" I didn't understand what she meant. "Don't pretend," she wagged her finger at me. "Your mother was here." Poor thing cried her heart out. "She told us how you abandoned them, refused to help. And they're old already, they could end up on the street." I froze, keys still in hand. So my mother had been visiting my neighbors? Telling them her side of the story? This had gone beyond pressure, it was an outright smear campaign. "Senora Blasco," I tried to speak calmly, "you only know one side of the story. My parents left out a lot. What's there to leave out?" She crossed her arms. "Parents are parents. You have to respect and help them. My son gives me half his salary every month, even though he can barely make ends meet himself. And you? You have a good job, you wear suits, and you abandoned your parents." I realized it was useless to argue. To her, children helping parents was an unquestionable axiom. "Excuse me, I have to go." I simply walked around her and headed toward the entrance. "Shame on you," she shouted after me. "In my day, sons like you were called traitors." I climbed the stairs to my apartment, feeling anger and resentment boiling inside me. They wouldn't stop, I realized. They would use every means, social media, work, neighbors, all to paint me as a monster and force me to pay. Opening the door, I noticed an envelope on the floor. Someone had slipped it under the door. Inside was a note, written in my mother's familiar handwriting. "Son, you should know. Tomorrow the bank is putting the house up for auction. Your father and I will be staying with Aunt Nina, who has agreed to take us in. Victor will stay with a friend. I hope you're satisfied now. Mom." Attached to the note was a photo of the house, the same one I had poured so much time, effort, and money into. Underneath it was a caption. "This could have been a happy family's home." It felt like another punch in the gut. I stood in the middle of my tiny kitchen, clutching the note, and a wave of doubt crashed over me. Maybe I really was being too harsh. Maybe I should help them one last time. After all, it was the house. So many memories, so much invested. My phone vibrated. A message from Irene. "How are you?" I called, but you didn't pick up. "I'm fine." I remembered I had put my phone on silent earlier at work after the conversation with my boss. I dialed her number. "Hey," Irene's voice sounded worried. "How are things?" "Honestly? Terrible." I sank onto a chair. "They've crossed every line. Called my work, wrote to my boss, turned the neighbors against me. And now the house." "What about the house?" "They say the bank is putting it up for auction." Mom left a note under my door. There was a pause on the line. "And how do you feel about it?" Irene asked finally. "I don't know," I answered honestly. Anger. Hurt. And guilt, strangely enough. Even though I know that's exactly what they're trying to stir up. "Sandro," her voice softened, "do you want me to come over? You shouldn't be alone right now. Come over, please." I was grateful for her offer. The thought of spending the evening with Irene rather than alone with my heavy thoughts was a lifesaver. While waiting for her, I decided to verify what my mother had written. I called the bank where my parents had their mortgage, introduced myself as their son, and asked about the loan status. The situation was serious, the manager confirmed. 3 missed payments in a row, he said. The total debt, including penalties and fines, is around $20,000. If the current arrears aren't paid within 5 business days, the foreclosure process will begin. So the house will be auctioned off? I clarified. Not immediately, the manager explained. First there will be a court process, then enforcement proceedings, appraisal of the property. But yes, eventually the house will be sold to cover the debt. I thanked him and hung up. So, Mom had exaggerated a little when she said the house would be auctioned off tomorrow. But the threat was real. And the 5 business days gave me some time to think. Irene arrived an hour later, carrying a bag of groceries and a bottle of wine. Thought you wouldn't be in the mood to cook, she smiled, unloading the groceries. And it's hard to think straight on an empty stomach. While she prepared dinner, I told her about the conversation with the bank manager. So you have 5 days to make a decision, she said thoughtfully, stirring sauce on the stove. What will you do? I don't know, I shook my head. Part of me feels sorry about the house. So much effort, so many memories. But if I give in now, they'll think they can keep manipulating me forever. What if, Irene paused, what if you buy the house yourself? What do you mean? I didn't get it at first. Look, she turned to me. The bank will eventually auction the house. You can buy it. If it's worth more than the outstanding loan, your parents will get the surplus, and they can rent a modest place. And the house will legally be yours. I thought about it. The idea was unexpected, but logical. If the house was going to be sold anyway, why not buy it myself? You know, there's something to that, I nodded. I need to find out the details. Wait, Irene turned off the stove and sat across from me. Before you start making plans, ask yourself honestly. Are you ready to live in that house after everything that's happened? Won't the walls remind you of the betrayal and hurt? It was a good question. A house isn't just walls and a roof, it's memories, atmosphere, emotions. I don't know, I rubbed my forehead. Maybe I couldn't live there. But at least it would be my choice. I could sell it, rent it out, or even give it away. The important thing is, I'd reclaim what should rightfully be mine. Irene nodded. I understand. Let's go to the bank tomorrow and find out all the details. We had dinner, drank some wine, and for the first time in a long while, I felt some relief. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was a plan, not just reacting to my parents' manipulations. The next morning, before heading to the bank, I decided to check social media. As expected, Mom had already posted a photo of the house with the caption, "Goodbye, dear home. Thanks to a son who would rather throw his parents out on the street than help them in a time of need." The comments were full of outrage and sympathy. How horrible. How could anyone do that to their parents? That never happened in our time. And dozens like it. I closed the page. Let them say what they want. I knew the truth, and that was enough. At the bank, we met with the same manager I had spoken to on the phone. After listening to my situation, he explained the options. If your parents repay the current arrears, including all penalties, within 5 business days, foreclosure proceedings won't start. If not, legal action will begin. But the auction itself could take several months. Can I buy the house? I asked. Theoretically, yes, the manager nodded. Once the house is up for auction, you can participate as a regular bidder. But there are risks. First, the starting price will be set by an independent appraiser and could be above market value. Second, the auction is open, someone else might outbid you. And if I just pay off the debt now and have the house transferred to my name? I inquired. That would require the consent of the owners, he explained. They would have to legally transfer ownership to you, and only then could you either refinance the mortgage or pay the remainder in full. I left the bank with a clear understanding. I couldn't just take the house. Either my parents had to agree to transfer it to me, or I would have to wait for the auction, risking someone else buying it. What do you think? Irene asked when we got back to the car. I think I need to talk to my parents, I decided. Offer them a deal. I pay off the debt and they transfer the house to me. And if they refuse, then they'll have to solve the problem themselves or get ready for the auction. I dialed my father's number. After several rings, he picked up. I'm listening. The voice sounded dry, without the usual hello, son. Dad, I read Mom's note and called the bank. The situation isn't as critical as you described. You have 5 days to settle the debt. And you're calling to tell me you'll pay? There was a glimmer of hope in his voice. I'm calling to propose a deal, I said firmly. I'll pay off the debt and take over the remaining mortgage, but you'll transfer the house to me. There was silence on the line. So you want to take the house from us? My father finally said, his outrage obvious. No, Dad. I want to claim what I've been paying for over the past 7 years. The house I invested my money, time, and effort into. And where are we supposed to live? On the street? His voice carried an accusatory tone. You can stay right where you are, I offered. I'm not kicking you out. The house would simply be in my name, not yours. And what about Victor? Where will Victor live after we're gone? There it was. It all came back to Victor again. That's no longer my concern, I said firmly. Maybe he'll finally find a job and earn his own place to live. No, my father snapped. We don't agree. Not a chance. Then prepare for an auction. I tried to keep my voice calm, though inside I was seething. In a few months, the bank will sell the house to recover your debt. And there's no guarantee you'll even have enough left for a single room. You're no son of ours anymore, my father's voice trembled with rage. Remember my words. I remember other words too, Dad, I said quietly. When you called me a bastard, when you threatened to show up at my work, when you wrote letters to my boss. I think we stopped being a family a long time ago. I was just the last one to realize it. My father hung up. I sat in the car, clutching the phone in my hand. Strangely, I didn't feel anger or resentment. Just exhaustion and a deep emptiness. As if I had just finished a grueling task that had drained me completely. They didn't agree? Irene asked softly, resting her hand on my shoulder. No, I shook my head. It's more important to them that Victor gets the house someday than to keep a roof over their heads right now. What will you do? Nothing, I started the car. Let things take their course. The bank will initiate foreclosure, there will be a trial, then an auction. If no one outbids me, I'll buy the house. If someone does, then it wasn't meant to be. And your parents? Irene's voice was full of concern. They'll have nowhere to go. They have relatives, I shrugged. Aunt Nina, for example. Besides, they'll get the difference between the house price and the remaining debt. Enough for a room in a dormitory. We drove home, and all the way I thought about how easily family ties that once seemed unbreakable could fall apart. How quickly love and care could turn into manipulation and blackmail when money and property were involved. That evening I received a message from Mom. You broke my heart, son. I never thought I had raised such a cruel person. Your father collapsed with high blood pressure after talking to you. I hope you're satisfied. I didn't reply. What could I say? Any response would only be used against me. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended state. I went to work, met with Irene, tried to live an ordinary life. But my thoughts constantly returned to my parents, the house, the upcoming auction. Aunt Nina called 3 days later. Sandro, I don't understand what's going on. Your parents moved in with me. They say you kicked them out of the house. I didn't kick anyone out, I answered wearily. They refused my help under my conditions. What conditions? She sounded genuinely puzzled. I briefly explained the situation. About the years of payments, the will favoring Victor, and my offer to pay off the debt in exchange for the house being transferred to me. So you offered to let them keep living there? She clarified. Yes, I confirmed. The only difference would be that the house would be in my name. And they refused? Aunt Nina sounded astonished. Yes. Because after their death, the house would go to me, not Victor. There was a pause on the line. You know, Sandro, Aunt Nina finally said, I always thought your mother was a reasonable woman. But now, I just don't understand her. Honestly. Neither do I admitted. And I'm tired of trying. After that conversation, something changed. Aunt Nina, who had always sided with my parents before, now saw the situation differently. And perhaps, through her, other relatives would too. Not that it mattered much to me. I had made my decision and wasn't going to back down. But it was nice to know not everyone saw me as a monster. On the 7th day after the conversation with my father, Victor called me unexpectedly. We need to talk, he said without any greeting. About what? I was surprised he called. Not over the phone. Let's meet. In our old courtyard, by the bench near the playground. You know the one? I know, it was the bench where we used to sit as kids, watching the little ones play and dreaming about the future. When? Today at 6. And, come alone, Victor added strangely. All right, I agreed, intrigued by his request. At 6 o'clock I was there. Victor was already sitting on the bench, hunched over, staring at the ground. He looked terrible. Pale, with dark circles under his eyes. His once stylishly messy hair was now just unkempt, and stubble shadowed his cheeks. Hey, I sat down beside him. Hey, he didn't lift his eyes. Thanks for coming. What's going on? I got straight to the point. Victor took a deep breath, as if gathering his strength. I want to rewrite the will. I want to renounce the inheritance in your favor. I stared at Victor in disbelief. This had to be some new trick. Another manipulation orchestrated by our parents. What's with the sudden change? I crossed my arms over my chest. Victor finally looked up. His eyes were filled with exhaustion and something else. Shame? Our parents don't know I'm here, he said quietly, as if afraid someone might overhear. They don't know about my decision. Then why? I still didn't understand. Because I'm only now beginning to realize what I've done, Victor ran a hand through his hair. Or rather, what I haven't done all these years. You paid, you helped, you invested. And I just lived off it and thought it was normal. I stayed silent, unsure of what to say. I definitely hadn't expected such an admission. You know, when we moved in with Aunt Nina, it was the first time I saw how ordinary retirees live, Victor continued. A small apartment, modest meals, counting every penny. And I realized that our parents never lived like that. Thanks to you, they could afford so much more. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. I wrote a renunciation of inheritance. The notary said it's not enough, our parents still have to change the will. But it's a first step. I took the paper and quickly skimmed it. It was indeed an official document with the notary's seal. Why now, Victor? I still doubted his sincerity. Because I finally grew up, he said simply. Took me 30 years, can you believe it? He gave a bitter smile. And one more thing. I got a job. At a call center. Not much, but it's a start. I was stunned. Could it be that my perpetually childish brother was really starting to change? And what's next? I asked. What about the house? I want to talk to our parents. Convince them to change the will and accept your offer. The house should be yours, it's only fair. We talked for another hour. Victor told me how hard it had been for him to reevaluate everything inside, how terrifying it was to admit he was wrong, how ashamed he felt for all the years he had freeloaded. I could see how much he was struggling, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something like brotherly closeness. The next day, Victor called and said our parents agreed to meet. Neutral ground, a cafe in the city center. The meeting was tense. Mom cried, Dad sat in grim silence. But in the end, after 2 difficult hours of conversation, they agreed. I would pay the debt and take over the mortgage, and the house would be officially transferred to me. They could continue living there until they decided to move out. Just one question, my father said as we were about to leave. Why aren't you kicking us out? After everything we did to you. Because I don't want to be like you, I answered simply. I don't want to use the people I love or hurt them, even if they might deserve it. A month later, all the documents were finalized. The house was officially mine. Rightfully and lawfully. My parents continued living there, but something in our relationship had irreversibly changed. The warmth, sincerity, and trust were gone. We communicated politely but distantly, like distant acquaintances. Victor surprised everyone by holding his job for more than 3 months. Then he found a better one with improved conditions. He started renting a room and planned to save for his own place. We started seeing each other more often, just as brothers, without the burden of parental context. Half a year later, I proposed to Irene. She said yes. At the wedding, my parents sat quietly, trying to fake happiness for their son, but I could see the misunderstanding and resentment in their eyes. They could never accept that I had done the right thing by standing up for myself. To them, I would always be the ungrateful son who failed to fulfill his duty. Another year passed, and my parents decided to move. They said it was too hard to live in a house that no longer belonged to them. I didn't object. Irene and I were planning to have a child, and having our own home was timely. My parents bought a small apartment on the outskirts of the city with the money they got from selling their old car. They started living modestly, within their means. Our relationship never fully recovered. Too much had been said, too much could not be forgotten. But I have no regrets about my decision. Sometimes you have to be firm to end toxic relationships, even with the people closest to you. The day my daughter was born, I made a vow. She would never know what parental manipulation feels like. She would never feel that love comes with conditions or a price. I would love her unconditionally, support her choices, and respect her decisions. Because a true family is where you're accepted as you are, not used for someone else's benefit. Where love isn't measured in money or favors. Where you're loved simply because you exist. This simple truth cost me dearly to learn. But maybe, thanks to that painful experience, I'll be able to become a better father to my daughter than my parents were to me. As for that ill-fated house, it ceased to be a symbol of betrayal and resentment. Now it's our family home, filled with laughter, love, and happiness. A place where a new family is growing. Without toxicity, without manipulation, without conditions. A real family.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.